People keep calling Trump crazy, reckless, out of control. I don't buy it. Because reckless men don't usually build buffers before a shock. They don't line up extra barrels, protect domestic supply, unlock reserves, and position their country to sell into a crisis. Strategists do. So here's my argument. You may love Trump, hate Trump, vote for him, or never vote for him. But if you want to understand what just happened, stop asking whether he looks chaotic on TV. Start asking a harder question. Was he prepared before the Iran shock hit? I think the answer is yes. And before we go further, hit like and tell me in the comments what you think this is. Chaos, strategy, or something in between. Because this is exactly the kind of story where the surface narrative and the real structure are not the same. For me, the first clue is Venezuela. Not as a trophy. Not as the reason for the war. As cover. As insurance. As a pre-shock buffer. Before this energy crisis fully hit, Washington had already been pushing to reopen and expand U.S. access to Venezuelan crude, while U.S. refiners benefited from more sour barrels and a stronger supply cushion. Reuters reported that U.S. imports of Venezuelan crude in the first quarter rose to about 295,000 barrels a day, the highest since late 2018. That matters because this is not just more oil. It is the kind of crude that fits an important part of the U.S. refining system. Then you add the second layer, reserves. On March 11th, the International Energy Agency announced the largest coordinated emergency stock release in its history, making 400 million barrels available to the market. The United States also moved additional oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve in April. So again, this does not look like a country walking blind into an energy shock. It looks like a country entering the storm with backup already in place. And then there's domestic production. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, American crude production set a new annual record in 2025 at 13.6 million barrels a day. That changes everything. Because when you are already producing at that scale, a price shock is not just a threat. Under the right conditions, it can also become leverage. That, to me, is where the Trump is crazy story starts to fall apart. Because crazy is random. This doesn't look random. This looks cold. It looks like a president who understood that if the Iran front escalated, the United States needed three things: more compatible supply, more cushion, and more room to export into a panicked market. And that is exactly what happened. If this is your kind of analysis, follow the channel now. Because I'm not interested in recycling headlines. I'm interested in the mechanics underneath them: supply, bottlenecks, buffers, leverage, and who gets exposed first. Now here's the part that really matters for an American audience. This is not just about the Middle East. This is about your gas tank, your grocery bill, your airfare, your inflation, your purchasing power. The Associated Press reports that jet fuel shortages are already threatening airlines, especially in Europe and Asia, with higher fares and reduced flexibility for travelers. Reuters also reported that Fed officials were warning the war was already feeding inflation pressure through energy. In other words, this is not abstract geopolitics. This is what happens when supply stress moves from the oil market into the real economy. And while others absorb the pain, the U.S. is also selling into it. Reuters reported that U.S. crude exports surged to 5.2 million barrels a day last week, close to turning the United States into a net crude exporter for the first time since World War II. About 84% of those exports went to Europe and Asia. Reuters also reported that U.S. fuel exports hit a record in March as Europe and Asia scrambled to replace Middle East supplies. So the point is not only that America is more protected. The point is that America is also in position to profit from everyone else's exposure. And Trump basically said that part out loud. Reuters reported in March that Trump said the United States is the world's biggest oil producer and that when prices rise, we make a lot of money. That sentence matters. Because it tells you how he sees the crisis, not just as a danger to manage, but as an opportunity to exploit. Now, let me be careful here. There are darker theories around all of this. Pressure, leverage, political vulnerability, Israel, Epstein, blackmail, dossiers, maybe. But I don't need any of that to make the core argument. Because the energy logic is already strong enough on its own. You don't need the fog to explain the structure. And the structure is this. If you believed the Iran front was likely, then the rational move was to protect U.S. energy exposure before the full shock arrived. That is exactly what this sequence looks like. There's another sign this is structural, not temporary. The routes themselves are changing. Reuters reported in March that the Panama Canal was already running at top capacity as the Iran war pushed more LNG vessel traffic and made Panama more important for moving U.S. energy cargoes. AP also reports that Europe and Asia are already feeling the strain in aviation and fuel logistics. That means this is not just a pricing event. This is a rerouting event. And when routes change, power changes with them. So no, I would not call this insanity. I would call it something worse. Prepared cynicism. Strategic cover. Predatory timing. A leader who may have decided that if a shock was coming, America should suffer less, sell more, and let others absorb more of the first wave. If you disagree, good. Drop a comment. Tell me where you think the argument breaks. Because the best discussions are the ones where people bring evidence, not slogans. And if you want the deeper framework behind this way of reading power, supply, and crisis, buy my book, The Third Side of the Coin. That is exactly what the book is about. The real game is usually not in the speeches. It is in the flows, in the bottlenecks, in the hidden buffers, in who is ready before the market understands what is happening. That's why crazy is too easy, too comforting, too shallow. Because if Trump were just crazy, this would be easier to dismiss. If he was prepared, then this is not chaos. It's strategy.